My name is Sarah Fargo O'Brien, and I'm a licensed clinical social worker here in Virginia.
What inspired you to get into the mental health field?
Oh, yeah. Well, I find people interesting, so there's definitely that. Yeah, and I knew I wanted to be a therapist way back in high school, probably taking my first psychology class, but really doing more of a deep dive into that in psychology and trying to understand the human mind and human behavior. And I really wanted to understand why people do the things that they do. And so I kind of set out to learn about it. Little did I know that a lot of my own life experiences would help inform my work as a therapist and my connection with my clients. And so it's a natural fit at this point.
Yeah, can you tell me a little bit about your own mental health journey?
Yeah, so I grew up in a traumatic childhood with a lot of emotional abuse and neglect that has left me with complex PTSD. Now, that is kind of a new in the last couple of years realization for me. I had anxiety and some OCD symptoms and tendencies throughout my life. Really struggle with perfectionism, so a lot of anxiety kind of comes with that, a lot of anxiety about performance and academic performance and succeeding and achieving. And so a lot of that anxiety actually probably fueled a lot of my achievement because I wanted to do well and was anxious about not doing well, right? So it led me to there. Um, and so yeah, it's been an interesting journey for me as well. I've experienced traumatic death and grief. I have experienced other traumatic situations like sexual assaults and domestic violence, and um, really had a lot of experiences that connected with my clients sort of in a real way, right? Like we're real people who've gone through real things. And I just went to school to study and learn and get licensed in helping other people, navigate this and treat their mental health conditions. So again, they go hand in hand. The more I can learn about myself and my own mental health issues, and the more I can also help my clients with those same issues. So I'm always learning for their sake and for my sake, which is really beneficial for both. It's beneficial for my own healing and hopefully beneficial for their healing as I work with them.
Yeah, that brings me to my next question, actually. How does working with your clients help your own healing process?
Perspective, probably a lot of the time. And, what I always like to say is I work with individuals. And so I look for patterns, but I also work with individuals. So everybody is very individual and unique and authentic in their own way. Not any two people present the same way, even if they have the same diagnosis, let's say. Um, and so I think it also is really helpful for me and just people interactions, especially since I have a lot of relational trauma and betrayal trauma, and that's sort of what leads to the CPTSD diagnosis that I have. And so also working with so many individuals and seeing patterns helps me see patterns in myself and those around me, but it also helps me see like the thread that runs through all of us, like that there's a humanness that transcends or supersends, mental health issues, and people are people, and there's so much that we have in common. And I think I get to see that because people tell me all the stuff, right? The stuff that they don't say to other people, they say in their therapy hour. And so hearing all of those things, all of those like deep things that or, deep secrets or deep thoughts and desires or things that people have that they're afraid to tell anybody else, right? I hear many, multiple individuals tell me those things, but they're not saying it to anybody else. But I can see where we all sort of have that thread that runs through us. Like all of us have a lot of those fears and concerns, or to some degree, right? Like whatever it is they're harboring, and they think it's just them. It's like it's not just them, and I know that from working with so many individuals. And even though they present differently, there is something that is you know, um, just human about us that links us all. And I can see that really clearly in all of my work. And I think that helps me to keep a positive outlook for myself, for life, for things that happen. I also see my clients like create and make transformational change for themselves and come out of so many difficult situations and, deep in their mental health issues. And that's inspiring, and it gives me motivation to do my own work to reach my own level of, optimal wellness, whatever that might be for me.
And you said earlier that you're in Virginia. I'm in Northern Virginia,
Okay.
and I do a lot of stories about mental health in Virginia. And I feel like a lot of people are ahead of the curve in mental health in Virginia. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think in some ways that is true. And I might credit that to the Virginia Society for Clinical Social Work to some degree. I'm a social worker, so that's where I'm focused there. But they have been, lobbying and advocating for at least for social work and clinical social work practice for 50 years or more. And we have a dedicated lobbyist that helps us push through legislation for mental health and for mental health providers. And I think that has made a big difference. And I agree, like in some ways, and what I know, some of my colleagues in other states, um, yeah, I mean, it's available. It's pretty available, although it's not as accessible for everybody across the board everywhere as we would like mental health treatment and mental health care to be. Um, but yeah, I find that there's a lot of understanding about the importance of mental health treatment here, at least to some degree. And we do have um, several pieces of legislation that have gone through that help facilitate that. And one that just happened this year, the governor in Virginia passed the Interstate Compact for social work, which then hopefully will open us up, since the pandemic hit and telehealth has like blown up, right?
Yeah.
So the Interstate Compact will give licensed clinical social workers in Virginia, well, anybody in the United States who have signed the Interstate Compact, once they get all the regulation for that going through, then all of us that participate in the Interstate Compact will have the ability to practice across state lines via telehealth in whatever states have agreed to the Interstate Compact, which opens up accessibility a lot of times because you might not be able to find a specialist in
Yeah.
your area, right? Or in your state, or, definitely telehealth has opened up access, I think, like, especially for small areas, rural areas, Virginia has a lot of those. And as long as we have, excellent internet service, which is always not always the case in rural areas in Virginia either. But there has been big initiatives also since the pandemic, for increasing broadband and internet in rural areas in Virginia for access to telehealth treatment, either mental health or otherwise. So that's been something new in Virginia too that I think sort of pushes us ahead. And so with the new development of all of that, and the interstate compact, access to providers and maybe specialized providers and certain things will be more available to more people.
And I see a lot of your posts from on LinkedIn, and
Yes.
then I see you're on podcasts. You work with
Yes.
nonprofits. What is it like to get your voice out there?
Oh, it's been super cool. I mean, I never would have guessed this, I've been a direct practitioner for 15 years and only recently have I tried to like pivot into some other things. I love writing and I love speaking. And apparently other people like that. So then it just keeps kind of rolling, right? Like I don't know who's gonna like what. I'm just trying to show up and be myself and then figure out where that alignment happens. And and you mentioned LinkedIn. I've grown quite a network, professional network on LinkedIn, and that has afforded me a lot of my opportunities with some of these other things, working with the nonprofits and having a podcast and becoming a chief mental health officer for another organization, right? Like I've met all my colleagues through LinkedIn, almost none in Virginia. So there's that as well, right? And so getting the reach there, as a one-to-one direct service provider for so long, I mean, I see the change individually, right? One person at a
Yeah.
time. But it's nice to be able to have a larger platform to be able to say, hey, this is what's happening, right? Because and this is what's going on in the world, and this is a mental health perspective, right? And trauma informed care, because although I do believe I'm affecting change in the one-to-one space, other people don't know what's happening in that one-to-one space, especially if they are not interested or have not participated in therapy themselves or do not have awareness about that. And so the other thing, yes, is to also have people understand what this process is, what it looks like, reduce the stigma, right? Like,
Yeah.
you can't know what's happening one to one in the room because of confidentiality. So I have to find a way to sort of talk about all those things, maintain confidentiality. But my hope is to, educate the wider public on these things and the stigma, create more awareness, more conversation. It doesn't need to be taboo. Let's bring it into the conversation, whatever it might be.
What is it like public speaking?
People always ask me that. It doesn't feel like public speaking because I'm not in front of
I'm
I'm
so
not in front of a
nervous with
live
it.
audience.
So
I mean,
yes.
like, I'm not standing up live in front of anybody yet. So I do a lot of these, or if I'm on like
Yeah.
a podcast, I can't see anybody. I see maybe chat stuff coming in. And so some other people have like popped in my DMs and they're like, how do you do it? How do you do it? And it's like, I really feel like I'm just talking into the void, into my computer, which I do every day, one to one with clients. And so if I'm one to one with you, like, this is easy. Like, you're going to post it later, and sure, a bunch of people are going to see it. But right now, it's just you and me having a conversation. And I can do that all day, every day, right? I do that all day, every day. And so I'm happy to have conversations, with people. And it doesn't feel so much like public speaking. It feels like I'm having conversations with people. And I try to approach a lot of my work like that. Even my podcast, when I'm like talking to nobody, it sounds like I'm having a conversation with myself and like random people out there or whatever, right? And I have lots of experience in this. I have one-to-one conversations all day, every day for 15 years, so and I enjoy people. I enjoy having conversations with people and learning about them, whether I'm in the clinical treatment space or in, a collaborative space or in an interview like this. I enjoy talking to people and different kinds of people. And so for me, it's kind of a lot of fun. It's like another way I get to be creative, another way I get to use some of my skills and some of my strengths, but it pulls me out of the one-to-one clinical space, um, and gives me, greater audience, greater access, right? And just, um, ability to say more to more, and I got lots to say. If you see me on anything, I got lots to say. So it's nice that somebody finally gave me the mic and said, "Here's Air Talk," and I'm like, "Okay, I got all this to say." So I'm just kind of rolling with it for now.
And with one-on-one sessions, do you see your clients' confidence level rise as they just have someone to talk to?
Sometimes, yeah, it depends on what space that they're in and where they are, like sort of in their
Yeah.
journey and their work. It ebbs and flows. Every day is not a good day in general, and
Yeah.
every day is not a good day in therapy in general, right? Like sometimes those are hard. But I work in trauma a lot, mostly trauma, anxiety, and substance use disorders are my specialties. Those all kind of like overlap and go hand in hand. And they tend to kind of show up with each other. And I specialize in relational betrayal trauma, so it's more CPTSD than PTSD. So it's complex, right? And if we're talking about childhood trauma, attachment disorders and trauma and or relational betrayal trauma, it's really complicated, and runs really deep and affects many parts of a person's life in a lot of ways that they probably haven't seen. So I say that to say a lot of the clients that I work with one-on-one, I have for a while. Like, I see them
Yeah.
they stay with me for a while, years, 5 years more, 8 years. Some people I've had a long time, right? And um, over that time, I absolutely see transformational change in people that stick to it, whether it's all, we're not always going like this, but they're just sort of committed to themselves, and we do the work and the good, bad, ugly, and different, and eventually to see them like reach their ideal self, whatever that looks like, where they want to live, the job they want to have, who they want to be, friends they have, relationships they have, how they feel about themselves, is just truly remarkable. I mean, I just see people um transform themselves and then become who they want to be and then thrive. That's why I've named my practice Thrive and Shine. Like, that's where we're getting to. Like, I want to see them thrive, and they might just be surviving, right? In survive mode when they come to me. And that's cool. We can hang out in survive mode and like keep your head above water and cope, until we build enough rapport and you build enough strength and you have enough capacity and coping strategies to sometimes do the deep dive into trauma healing work or addiction healing work. And once that kind of happens, and you see them start to get it kind of for themselves, it's awesome. there are many of my clients that I'm just so proud of the work they've done, and I know that they are like living better, feeling better. It's not so stressful and like difficult for them to move through life anymore. Like whatever, like I said, jobs, relationship, any of it, all of it's hard, to some degree. And then to see them get to a place where like it's not all really that hard for them anymore and they can live the way they want to live is awesome for me. I mean, that's like one of the greatest perks of the job. And so I love seeing them come into themselves and to their own self-confidence and their own self-worth and knowing who they are and being their authentic self and not apologizing for it anymore and feeling whole and healed and well. Um, and it's pretty cool, and I work with adults, so um, to get to do that kind of intimate work with adults that that you don't have really a personal relationship with, right? Like these aren't friends, um, is really interesting. It's a really unique profession and a really unique position as a healthcare provider, to be that involved in my clients' lives and their transformation.
What do you do to help your own mental health?
Oh, so much. I have my own therapist, so let's talk about that. Every good therapist has their own therapist. It's the way it goes. You might just need your own therapist because the job is hard, even
Yeah.
if you don't have your own stuff. It's a lot to hold, for other people, and so you also need a space. So I attend therapy, I journal, I read books, I listen to music, I dance, I get outside every day, take my dogs for walks, I do yoga, try to practice deep breathing. Really, here recently, I've tried to get into a lot more things that I enjoy, and I have found some hobbies that I like bullet journaling or making bracelets and just doing other fun craft projects. And all of that stuff is good for my mental health, in addition to prioritizing sleep, drinking enough water, like trying to eat, somewhat balanced meals and do all the physical care things for myself. And probably one of the hardest ones for me that's taking like a little bit longer is really like developing and curating like a supportive and safe community. And so slowly that's happening more and more as I get into more of my healing and more of myself and more of my authentic self. Thank you to my therapist that's helping me come into myself. And not feel bad about it, right? And be able to show up as is, as Sarah, no matter if I'm wearing the professional hat or out in the world. Um, that's all extremely valuable for me as well. And as I come into more of myself, I'm able to find, those value aligned and like-minded individuals, where I can connect safely, right? And have safe supports. And that's probably like the piece that's hardest for my clients too. It's like all the stuff you can do for yourself, are kind of the first things we're doing for our mental health, right? Like the self-care, all the physical
Yeah.
stuff, and then doing some of those other things I'm saying, like journaling or reflecting or, finding what's good. And then we kind of like, ripple out a little bit. And then we have to sort of curate a safe and supportive community because we're not meant to live in isolation. We're meant to live in relationship, but that is hard for people that have relationship trauma. You know what I mean? And that's like mainly what I work in. And individuals that have substance use disorders are ostracized and judged a lot, so they have difficulty finding community, kind of for those reasons. And it's scary, right? And if you don't feel self-confident or feel well in your own mental health, it's going to be hard to connect, attach, and develop relationships in a healthy way. So I see that sort of like as a ripple effect, me included, that kind of get to after I I've done some other healing, learned some other ways to cope and manage things for myself and understand things for myself. And I work really, really, really hard to practice what I preach. I will not offer something to clients if it's not something I'm not willing to do myself. And I normally will not offer something to clients that I haven't vetted and verified, right? So either another client, has given me the truth. And I believe when they're telling me in the therapy space that they've said if this worked or they went to
Yeah.
this primary care provider and they were great and they didn't get triggered there, right? Or whatever, then I take that and like offer those things to my other clients, right? And it's like I vet it first, I try to make sure somebody's having a good experience or use this product or did this thing or went to this person or used this skill before I'm offering it up. And I wouldn't offer anything that I wouldn't at least try once myself, to see. So, it's nuanced for people. They go through their process and their healing and their coping sort of in their own way. But sometimes it's synergistic. They got ideas about what works for them. I got ideas about what work for me, and we can swap, and trade and say, hey, here, try this. Does that work for you? Sometimes I throw out something, they're like, no, Sarah, that's terrible. That didn't work at all. And I'm like, okay, well, it doesn't work for everybody, but what you
Yeah.
got? What else you got? Okay, what else can we come up with? What does make more sense for you? That's all part of the process. But um, yeah, I mean, I feel like there are lots of things that I know, from things that work for my clients and just doing this work. It's a matter of putting into practice, right? And so I've ebbed and flowed in that, in my life, kind of like most people, but I've been really dedicated to focusing on my own mental health and finding my own wholeness and healing. And then the last about 2.5 years, and I am feeling the transformation within myself. Like I am starting to feel health returning to me, and healthy relationships returning to me, and healthy self-confidence returning to me. And when that's happening, right, I want to keep doing the things that are good for me. It's an easy, it's an easy exchange, right? It's an easy benefit from what I'm doing, pretty direct. And so I am working really hard to stay committed to, like my own self-care plan, my own mental health care plan. Because I also need that to be able to show up and do the work well with other people.
What would you say to anyone going through a tough time?
Pause, 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 and don't make a decision.
Yeah.
Um, Pause and think about it first. Maybe you're going to think about it on your own. Maybe you're going to talk with somebody else. Maybe you're going to write it down. If you feel like, you kind of get in your own echo chamber, like you can't answer your own questions, we just keep ending up in this like the same spot kind of thing,
Yeah.
or like the same outcome, then you might want to consider talking to somebody else and finding a mental health professional to help you like work through that stuff. But if you find yourself going through a hard time, I encourage you to pause, take a deep breath, and don't do anything. Just sit there for a minute, try to figure out what's going on. Is it circumstances? Is it how you feel? Is it poor mental health? Is it a bad relationship? Work stress, like what is it, like, and pausing might not be okay, a 30-second pause. Pausing might be like a few weeks, if you like, I'm
Yeah.
pausing, like not all the time, but like I'm pausing to try to, what is this, what is hard for me right now about the things. Sometimes we can feel it hard, right? Like I feel when times are hard, but don't know why. That takes a little bit more self-reflection, self-awareness, and context, right? Which means I also have to look at the context around me and the people around me and what's going on here and how is this impacting me. And so if you find yourself going through a hard time, pause, take a deep breath, self-reflect.
I could hear in your voice all the passion you have for this.
I
Where
hear
do
that a
you,
lot, so I guess that's good.
yes, no, it's really good. So, where do you want to see your mission, say, in the next 3 to 5 years?
Oh man, yeah. Okay, well, if I'm pie for the sky, right? Like, I don't know if this is gonna happen, but I've made a lot of stuff happen for myself already.
Right.
So we'll
Yeah.
see if I can get there, right? Professionally, like starting my own practice was one. That was a goal I had when I was 18 years old, right? Here I am doing it. So, I guess in the next 3 to 5 years, my hope is to break more into trauma-informed leadership positions. I have a few now, but basically, my stance is that trauma informed care benefits everybody. And trauma informed care is a how you show up, not what you know. It's not a clinical skill, it's a people skill, it's a human skill, an interpersonal skill. It's how you speak, it's how you make decisions, it's how you resolve conflict, it's how you show up as yourself. And that doesn't exist, okay, like in a lot of places, including in mental health treatment places. And I think, particularly for providers, mental health providers do not receive trauma informed care at their places of work for mental health treatment. The systems are really poor and they do not do a good job of supporting us, or training us or helping us navigate unsafe situations. And so there's a lot of trauma incurred for mental health professionals and mental health providers, especially probably early on in your career before you have a lot of experience. You're relying on supervision. You maybe don't have a license yet. You haven't been doing it as long. And so we definitely need to see it in those places and in healthcare places, but we really need to see it across the board in all industry. So my pie in the sky in the next 3 to 5 years is to be full-fledged trauma-informed consultant for as many big businesses as I can. corporations. Like we
Yeah.
have to change the landscape. We need to change the leadership landscape. We need to change the workplace landscape. Like people cannot function without being considered as humans. And if we're going to consider people as humans, we have to consider all of their lived experiences as humans, which for many, many, many people includes lived experiences of trauma. And that affects our day to day and pretty much how we move through the world. And so there needs to be an awareness about that. And there needs to be a shift in leadership and policy and application and implication of decision making when we are any places where there are people, any any places there are people. That's like just about every industry and every job, right? You can think of
Yeah.
tech, healthcare, food service, hospitality, education, everywhere. I mean, there's no place that I can see where this isn't needed. People are more siphoned off and isolated and less connected in community. And part of that is because we're struggling so much in our trauma and we're not getting healing and we're not receiving trauma informed care. So if you don't have trauma informed care at your workplace, and you get triggered at work, what happens? There's no psychological safety for you. Like
Yeah.
there's no containment, but it's like this is happening, folks. Like we can't ask people not to do that. That's just part of this process. But we need to have more consideration and care for humans, right? Which includes situations and instances like that for many people. Like I'm not just talking like, you know, one person on a team of 30. I'm talking like 20 people on that team of 30 probably have a lived experience of trauma,
No.
if not more,
Yeah.
right? And so it's like this needs to be everywhere, and we need to stop pretending like it's not part of the conversation. Recently I've just been sort of baffled by the idea, right, of workers' comp and like physical safety at work. And if you get hurt at work physically, there's like stuff
Yeah.
for that. But what about workers' comp for psychological harm at work
Yeah.
and safety? That costs money, healthcare, appointments, medication sometimes, right? And it's like there's no accountability for that, which is just crazy. It's like, how are we qualifying that physical hurt, pain, harm is worse than emotional, psychological hurt, pain, harm? It's not. And as a matter of fact, the
No.
neuroscience tells us that the exact same part in the brain lights up, whether it's physical pain or emotional pain. Your brain does not differentiate. Your body does not differentiate. So why are we differentiating in the workplace? Like this is part of like caring for the people that work there.
Yeah, I had a bad experience with working at a corporation, all because I said I had bipolar disorder too.
Oh, I'm not surprised. But that's terrible for
Yeah.
you and everybody else, because what can you do about that? That's
No.
not fair. Right. Yeah. You're like trying to make it. I'm working, I'm doing, but I need consideration as a human and this thing that I maybe struggle with sometimes. Right. Like there has to be space for that and grace for that, right? Or just like open space for you to sort of find your own safety in that. It shouldn't feel unsafe for you to say that at work, right? Or for
Yeah.
you to have a bad day in your bipolar disorder symptoms at work. That's a given, right? That's a given. We just said in the beginning, right? Like every day's not a good day.
No.
Right? Like, yeah.
Absolutely not.
So there's
Yeah.
got to be room at work for you to not be your best self sometimes. And it just doesn't feel like that, but we're not robots. So
No.
that's where I see like this needs to be everywhere. And I'm happy to like come in and speak about it, right? Like I'm happy to come in and teach you about it and try to get you to apply these skills so that we are reducing harm and reducing instances in which we cause harm because we are just not considering people in their full selves.
Speaking of getting a hold of you, how can people reach out and learn more?
Oh, so many ways, right? You can find me on LinkedIn. You can find my professional Instagram at Timeless Therapist. Everything and links to everything else is on my website, and that's www.sarahobrienlcsw.com. And you can find links to my blogs, all my publications, podcasts I've appeared on, and my own weekly podcast, resources, some free handouts, So my website is like the one-stop shop. You can find my email there, my phone number, you can send me messages, right? All of that is there as well. And then yeah, the other places I'm really active are on LinkedIn and Instagram. And I have a YouTube that's linked with that. Again, you can find all of those links there. And then all of the networks I'm a part of and all of the trauma-informed leadership roles I have are also housed within my website and or on LinkedIn. Those are probably the places you're going to find the most robust information about who I am, what I got going on, what I offer, and how you can reach me.